Manager HQ, where I'm interviewing product leaders and getting their insights through their product management journey and their current experiences. Today, I have Chuck Blevins, who is currently Director of Product Management in Emerging Markets at DigiCert. Welcome, Chuck. Very excited to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And welcome, everyone. Chuck began his career as a designer and graphic journalist and worked as a news artist. He then continued to go into a career in product management, and currently he's a distinguished faculty instructor at General Assembly teaching product management fundamentals. We're very lucky to have you today, Chuck.
Oh, good. I hope I've got something interesting to say.
Actually, I've never heard of the term news artist. What is that?
So, really, it's a production artist who is focused around illustrating either informational graphics, illustrations, charts, and so on for news, for the newspapers. Before kind of the huge trend of digital art came around, newspapers like USA Today and others were still trying to insert explainer information into their papers. So that's where we came in. It's a very quick turnaround, often deadline driven. You may have to go on an interview or go out on site. So I've done everything from, you know, analyzing SAT numbers, all stuffy, to being on site of F-15 crashes, to diagram how that hit the neighborhood and what had happened and explain the ramifications, usually as a supporting piece to the stories.
So it's a lot about connecting and just having.
Synthesizing and summarizing
Oh, very
would be the
nice.
way I would say it. Yeah.
So I also want to, I forgot to mention, for those viewers who are live, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box and we'll get to them. And thank you for joining us live. So, Chuck, can you describe your journey into product management with your experience in news artist?
So, like a lot of folks, I woke up one day and realized I was a product manager. Um, I had for most of my early career been kind of on the ice flow model of this seems fun, this ice flow comes along, this looks fun, let's see. And while I was young, that kind of paid off. Um, but one of the consistent trends in everything I do is really about kind of people and process and how they come together. So from the art side, it's all about how, if you're a news artist, how are we explaining, how are we meeting the audience, understanding the questions they're asking? How do we make these things work within quick timelines, constraints and rules and how much space you have so that you can get the important things out? I worked as an artist for about 10 years, last being the kind of the editor in the Metro section at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which was a sizable regional newspaper. And then I was just getting a little bored on doing the art. It's repetitive. Um, the informational stuff is there. I've got some friends who are still into it and do phenomenal work, but 10 years was kind of enough for me. And my stuff, illustration wise, had been moving digital. I was an early Photoshop user. So this career is early on Photoshop 2, 3, 4, and 5. So early 90s and early 2000s. And the technology group that was dedicated for the newsroom often would come to me with the new equipment. Hey, we've got, most amount of RAM you can get. And about an hour later, I was like, can I have more? Or, constantly pushing the limits of stuff for them. So it was a test bunny. And our web side was starting to roll up. And I was working on them, setting up video processes and pieces to get things out. So paying attention to the business aspect of them, like the ads, but also trying to get stuff in front of the customer. So between that, they recruited me into the tech group. This tech group was a mix of project managers, platform managers, and just general, hey, we discovered this thing at a conference last Thursday. We have no idea what it does. Can you get it up and running next Tuesday and tell us what we can do with this? So we would do that. Here's where you can go with it. So it was a lot of trying to work back and forth with the reporters who at the time were not the most technically combined people. I mean, we had people who didn't realize the monitor was different from the computer. And then we have others who were just, super adept with technology, but it was all over. So we had to kind of meet them on a common pace. So a lot of that training, working with the reporters, if they were going to go to war when I came in, we were going back over, and the reporters were going to be embedded. So the team had to figure out, well, how can they send photos if they're in the middle of a campaign? So that resulted in, satellite modems, and hey, here's the times of day the satellite will be overhead. Here's how you aim it. Here's how much time you have to do it. And somebody had, gotten some musician box that you see him carrying into concerts and padded the heck out of it and managed to get them fully equipped so they could report daily from the middle of literally nowhere while, dodging bullets. Um, Other stuff that's I consider glamorous, although far less dangerous, would be, equipping reporters for the Olympics. We're going over here. We're going to be doing these things. How are they there? Documenting it, doing it quickly, getting them set up, and making it really simple for them to follow so that they could do their job. Because in the end, they really didn't care about me or the fact that they could use a BlackBerry to do this. They were just like, I've got 2 hours to do this. I don't want to have to think about doing it. And you're going to teach me some new technology. So a lot of that really represent a lot of, it's usability. It is ergonomics. It is inserting the process in there and trying to simplify things. Design and graphic arts is very much like that. So that's kind of that trend through there. So I eventually managed that department for a little bit, and then got pulled into a new department there that was dedicated to really the web facing piece. And they were looking to how to handle advertorial content, revenue generating content, but that still had resonance with the reader and was not just clickbait. Was real journalism. And what we were trying to do is provide real journalism along with a way to get associated ads with that. So I was then called the platform manager. And my job was to find technologies and tools that would help us automate stuff. Papers were shrinking, fewer staff, but we were fighting a deluge of content. So I pulled up some of the first kind of aggregated tools that allowed us to pull in from other sources and sync and put things out. I eventually rolled into that to managing all of the mobile applications for Cox Newspapers, who was the chain's owner. Their iPad apps, I was involved in the first iPad app that we put out. Started out with just helping them manage the technology, but pretty soon was advising on process and product development and those sorts of pieces. So kind of all of those things put me in the spot. And then eventually I got a title senior product manager. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a product manager. I had always talked to the software folks. We had a very great team. One of the former members is the guy who created the Python framework Django. Brilliant folks who were part of the kind of the R&D department on the web. So they were very much involved on early lean software development and processes in UX. And I just go down and talk to them all the time because I was really connecting the people side of that to the software development side of that, and prioritization, making sure we're solving the right problem. Are we asking the right questions to know we're solving the right problem? Those sorts of things. So I'd always kind of taken that and stole all their good ideas and read up on the things. But I was kind of always in the nagging bit was, do I really know what I'm doing? It's successful, job's going okay, but I really don't feel like I've got a command of this. So I actually took a class in product fundamentals and was one of the older students in there. But really what it helped me do was take all the pieces I've read and really say, okay, if I want to do this at work Thursday, all this nice theory, what does that actually look like? So a lot of what I try to teach now is, there's 20 different frameworks, jobs to be done, standard product lean, you name it. But in the end, they're all trying to solve the same thing. How do we know we're solving the right problem for the right people in the right way?
Yeah, which leads me to what are the factors that go into solving problems for your customers?
Well, the first thing is know your customers. Ask them. Go out and talk to them to find out, are your problems being solved, or what are the symptoms? Everybody will tell you. Everybody is really good about talking about their symptoms, but kind of like COVID, everything feels like the cold, right? So how do we know what thing to actually solve for? Is to really go down and pay attention to what they're saying, hear the story they tell, Every once in a while you get some customers who are really savvy about telling you what the problem is and they can map it out. But by and large, most everybody else really knows what the problem is and then what they're trying to do to circumvent it. And the trick is not to treat their solution as the solution. Their solution may be a workaround. So the first bit is, yeah, are we clear on what the problem is? Love the problem is probably the first commandment. Know your customer, love the problem. And then based from there, you can then look at the opportunities. And then the opportunities fall into two parts, right? Because you got to have a sustainable business. The first one is, okay, if we do this thing, does this fall in line with what our business does, our current OKRs or our priorities? And if we did that from the business, would it actually solve it for the customer? Because really what we want to be able to do is provide something that is so awesome, the customers are going to say, oh yeah, I'd pay for that, no problem. And they're exchanging your solution for revenue, which is what it all boils down to. So you got to connect business and customers. Now, on the enterprise side, often we come at that backwards. We start with the business problem. We need to improve retention this year because it's thinking, well, so it's the question is why aren't people retaining? So then you go talk to them. What is the problem with our product that isn't being solved that you're leaving us to go somewhere? So we want to understand what the business problem to solve is, and then understand, well, what is the mirrored customer problem that is causing this, so that we can connect the dots and make sure we are solving for the customer so that we solve for the business. But a lot of businesses will build something and nobody comes because they solved a problem, but it really wasn't the problem the customer had, or it didn't solve it in a way that made sense to the customer, because we're not the customer, we're us. We know our constraints, we know what we're good at, we're going to do the stuff we know we're good at. So once you tie the customer and the business problems together, then the rest is really understanding the customer so you can look at all those options. Now, Teresa Torres, who is, thankfully up a lot in folks feed readers on there, has a great process for that with our opportunity trees, walking through the problems, looking at the opportunities. Because the next step is, well, how do we know which is the right opportunity to solve this? What is the right way to solve that? Because there could be a couple. And there's a lot of factors that come into that, both business constraint versus value to customer, time to market, those sorts of things. And that you want to kind of drive through to understand kind of, okay, what's the guess we're going to make to see if this works? Because everything's a college guess. No matter how well I understand the customer, it's still an educated guess if I'm right. We won't know until we do it, right? You've got to do the experiment. So opportunity selection is the same deal. And you're going to be wrong a lot. So the quick is, can I be wrong fast? And can I be wrong not catastrophically? So part of our job as PMs is to really kind of push for what's the solution look like? How quickly can we get to it? How big does it really need to be? Can we be incremental about it? We tend to talk in product circles very much on the startup model where you can be very incremental and build on. It's harder in enterprises to do that. Your customers have a higher expectation of quality and features out there. So you kind of have to take into account what the MVP for your company might look like versus somebody else, but you don't want to give yourself too much slack. You still want to kind of push that boundary so you can ship rather than not. And with large companies, it gets very easy, as I've been saying this week, to build these large sandcastles, because we know we're capable of doing this. Well, okay, are you going to get that out in June, or is that going to be out next year, which means never? It's never coming out from there. So those are kind of the key driving pieces. And I think that's kind of the fundamentals are simple. And I'd even say, you can go online and read the fundamentals. You can go read Steve Blank. You can read, Marty Kagan. They'll give you the fundamentals. The trick is really understanding, how do I put that in practice? And I think that's where the various product schools and pieces come down. Is they're really not going to teach you how to do product. It's just a framework. And in 5 months, we're going to have another framework somebody invented that everybody digs. But if I've got a day-to-day, figure out, how am I coming up with the solution? How am I getting my UX and my engineering people together to talk about the solution? How is that going to work? So, I'd say that comes into my leadership style. I try to be, PMs are servant leaders. My goal is to make my stakeholders' jobs super easy, because then it makes them do really good stuff and I look really good for it, because I didn't do any of the work they did. So That is driving clarity. That clarity comes from all the way back, that first commandment, understanding the customers and the problem and being able to work with them, time to the business, and push down. So as a PM, especially in a leadership position, a lot of this is making everybody clear on goals, direction, and playing referee. Accepting, I want tightly held opinions loosely held, so that if somebody comes up with evidence, go with the evidence. So I don't like micromanagement. I don't like really sitting over people's heads. It's very much, what's the outcome you're driving for? How are you getting there? Are you getting lost in the details and the politics? Go back to the outcome. Are we clear on what the outcome needs to be? And every time I have run into problems, it's because I have not been clear on the outcome, the desired outcome.
And there's so many questions I have from all the
that word salad that just came out.
so many questions. But let's go back to I guess you mentioned that you have to kind of use the fundamentals and then you practice. For those students like myself who don't have a product management career, how can you get that experience?
So there's a couple ways, especially if you're starting out. One is there are hackathons. There are, most metropolitan cities do weekend product things that are focused. Like Atlanta. Based in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta has a municipal hackathon every year to help build software to help services to the citizens, and it pulls in a lot of folks. You'll get coders, you'll get UX, you'll get everybody. That's a great shot for a PM, because a product manager needs to understand, how does UX work, how does coding work. But even though we use Golang. I don't do Golang, but I understand what's involved. Over time, I've learned it. UX, I come from more of a UXy background, so I get it, but I can have a conversations. A lot of times, people are looking for somebody to kind of help drive the consensus and clarity. So really, what you're doing as a leader is not what I would call the Musk model, or even the Steve Jobs model, which is this is the way it's going to be. And we can argue over who you think's more visionary or not. But in the end, most people are not that brilliant. Most people know they're not magic. Most people are not certain that what they're offering is the best thing. So part of the value proposition of product managers here is we make the sum greater than of its parts, helping pull everybody together, help drive clarity and consensus and commitment from all the parties on where we need to go by walking them through the steps, asking why. Are we clear on what is the outcome if we're going to do this? Having everybody there, having them sell, walking them through that, so they end up, if you're doing this super well, they end up selling it to themselves. They end up agreeing amongst themselves. So what you've done, if you've done it really well, is not look like you've really done anything. You've just kind of gotten the group together and had a chat, but the group decided where to go. And you want to take that group intelligence there and drive it. So, go ahead.
Sorry. And what are some of the skills that you recommend for people to kind of have everyone collaborate?
Right. So if you're gonna, go do one of those 24-hour hackathons, or get with a group to just develop an idea you have, which is really doing the things, and that's kind of the summary of that long rant was, do the things, get in and do it, see what breaks, see what doesn't work, and so on, and learn from it and go from there. Skill wise, product management, oddly enough, is really predicated around soft skills, which I'm a geeky introvert. I never thought I had soft skills, but it is listening and active listening and hearing people and not trying to solve the problem right away. Everybody's fast to solution. You want to keep everybody in the problem space and make sure we're really clear about this whole thing. So you're good at really diving down into the underlying pieces. Johnny comes running in, Mommy, my arm hurts. Okay, why does I need that. Why does your arm hurt? Well, Sally smacked me. Okay, Sally, why did you smack Jerry? Well, because he pulled my hair, right? So we get down to the core of the problem with the old 5 whys. Most people don't do that. because especially if they're in engineering or UX, that isn't their job. Their job is to say, you want me to build a thing, you tell me what that thing needs to look like, and I'll go build it. Some have more interest in it than others, and so on. UX, same way. UXers tend to be more like PMs in terms of how they think, which is nice. But a lot of your job in there is making sure those two groups are playing nicely, that if there are arguments, that they're productive arguments. Not all arguments are bad. One of the best teams I managed for a while would get really into it and they'd debate and argue and stuff, but they came out of it really energized. And but often I'd have to do a ruling because, okay, we're stalemate. Can we push off? Do I have an idea? Make a decision. Let's move on. So you've got to be able to make a decision, because your job is to tell people what the decision is. Now, that decision may be, I agree with engineering. Let's do this for now. That may be, I agree with UX, or got to be somewhere in between. I disagree with you both. I think we need to do this, and this is the piece. The other issue is you take the blame, but the team takes the win.
Mm.
You want people, especially people working, to do things that may look like they have some amount of risk of not turning out super well or not looking great. They get scared, right? Because they've got job interviews, they want to stay employed, and most of the stuff's not, employment level problems. But folks don't want to look bad, which is me saying, bring it back to me. I'm making this decision. I think this is the way to go. Fall it back to me. I've got it. So that they know you're going to back them up. They're more willing to make the choices and try things if they know that the fear of failure is not going to be catastrophic. So the other thing you have and you develop as a leader, this is harder when you're kind of at a place where nobody reports to you, and we've just all volunteered for the day. But a lot of your leadership piece is covering other people's butts, but expecting them to take the empowerment and the responsibility to do the things they need to do if you're going to hold their backs and make sure, hey, we will deal with this. Jeff Bezos has we screwed up, fine. Let's put together and have a meeting and how we're gonna avoid this in the future, and that's that, right? We learn from it and move on. So you've got to have a bit of a skin for that to throw yourself in front of it. Yes, you're going to feel like an imposter. Everybody does. It's okay. If they haven't caught on now, they never will. Making sure you're clear on the outcomes and the core. And if you can do that, then the soft skills really are negotiating, listening to people, asking lots of questions. Okay, explain to me why you think we should do that. And this will do what, right? Because just because I've got a snap decision doesn't mean I'm right. So a lot of what I tell people is my job is to be the dumbest person in the room, because you guys are doing the work, and my job as the dumbest person in the room is to make sure all of us make the smartest decision we can make. And what that means is I'm not here to tell you what to do. We're here to come from that, and I will help guide that. And that takes practice. But if you've worked retail and dealt with angry customers or even happy customers, if you've worked anywhere with businesses and there's competing politics and so on, you've done these things. Most of this stuff is not uncommon from all the soft skills you do by working. It's just putting them in an array to say, I'm not here to play politics, but we've got to come away with a decision. And if you can be biased towards that, then a lot of the other stuff kind of comes together a bit more easily, because you keep pulling people back to the midline from there. Now, that said, anything you can learn on negotiations is awesome. Anything you can learn about people and psychology is awesome. I haven't done exhaustive studies on there. And in part of my career, I avidly avoided politics. Now I'm knee deep in it. And the best way that I navigated is I just don't treat it like politics. I focus on the outcome. And I don't worry about the little peeing matches folks have, or even if they come at me, I go right through it. What's the outcome? And I just ignore it. And it makes life a lot better.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of overlap too in terms of like what you mentioned about product management fundamentals. What is the overall goal? So you go back to that even with the team. My next question, it sounds like there's a lot of trust as well involved in kind of having everyone collaborate within you.
Yes. There is, and in business, well, I'll go ahead and ask your question. Sorry.
How do you develop trust?
you have to, well, consistency for one. Consistency and then doing what you say you're gonna do. And the other is not, well, not being a know-it-all. I mean, I say I don't know all the time, but I've always said the correct answer is not I don't know. The correct answer is I don't know, but I'll find out. So depending on your role as a PM, I'm on the execution side, so I work with my development teams too. So often I'll get asked a question that I hadn't anticipated, and I might need to go to our compliance group to ask about it. And that's literally, gee, that's a good question. I don't know, or I think I know, but I'm not dead sure. Let's go ask, right? Because the point is not knowing the answer; it's getting the right answer. So I'd much rather look like I don't know and come out with a positive income than look like I know and break something. So that's for one, and that builds trust because you're human. They don't see you as somebody coming in and telling them you're going to build this thing in this way, and that's right. The other thing is, like I said, listening, and listening means asking. So I will come in and say, well, here's how I think, out of my head, I thought this might work. Does this make sense? And I might say that to my UX person, who I come from a design background, so I always do much nicer layouts because I have to and I've told that my UX, I said, ignore how pretty it looks. I know it's crap. This is the intent I'm going for. Go ahead and eviscerate it. I don't care. I just want you to understand what I'm trying to do. Same thing with engineering. Some of them are eager to say, well, yeah, we can do that, or this is a problem. I mean, I had a perfect case where I came in and I treated our code base the same way JavaScript worked. And I'd solved this same exact problem for myself a couple years ago. So I thought this was really simple. Well, if we were in JavaScript, it would have. We use a different language base. It does not work with that. Well, that engineer dutifully went down and tried to make it work the way I described it. And after wasting 2.5 hours, said, I don't think it's going to work. And I said, well, explain to me why not. I was like, dude, I am so sorry. Because I was prescribing what to be done, not focusing on the outcome and talking to them about how do we get there. So you want their input. They may have different ideas of doing about this. They're the subject matter experts in this area. Same thing with UX. It's harder for me to bite my tongue on areas that I'm at least competent in, but I had to stop back and say, UX, unless I have a clearly objective reason why this thing shouldn't be the way it is, I'm letting it go. I'm not going to debate it because that's what he and she are there for. So I've got to give them their expertise and run with it. And I can question them and walk about all these things, but in the end, they're the SME and they're telling me what's the best way to go and pulling everybody together so we can have a piece. So if you're listening, you're hearing them, they know you've got their backs and you're running, you're blocking and tackling, as we say, to make sure they're covered to do their things. That's a good bit. The other bit is giving them clarity. Am I telling them stuff that they can understand? So we'll go through our retrospectives and we had a couple newer folks and said, yeah, the user stories here are a little light on some context. So I'm having trouble doing this, and so I was like, okay, I'll fix that. You just run it, it's not a you're wrong, you don't know how to read it because you're new. It's like, if it wasn't there, I didn't put it there, I need to fix it for them. So, being reactive and responsive to how they need to work so you can manage the team. Now, doesn't mean I'm a whipping dog, does not mean I'm sacrificial lamb or anything else. It just means I take responsibility for the stuff that I do because I expect them to take responsibility for the stuff they do. And if they're telling me things could be improved, then how? What do you need? What's the context? Where isn't it working? Okay, I can work on that. So, you be just super collaborative because this team is delivering for you. Especially since most of them don't even will never actually report to you. They have other people paying their checks. They don't have to listen to you, but you make them want to listen to you because they know they can trust you and they know they can call you out. And I'm coming into, I've been 4 years at this new company that deals with public key infrastructure, which is all about encryption and certificates and stuff. And I knew the basics, but it's like agile. It's just crazy how everybody's implemented. So, I came in very stupid. So even 3, 4 years later, I'm saying it's okay to treat me if I'm stupid. I said, throw it out here. Tell me I'm wrong. We need to know this. It's not an issue of my ego telling you what to do. Here's the outcome. And if I'm clear on the outcome, they can come back and say, well, if you want to do this, that won't work.
Yeah, I love how you're very genuine and open with the people that you collaborate with, and it's not about ego. It's always about the outcome and the product and the business, and that's really amazing that you have that type of relationship.
I work at it. I'm not great with people. Um, Despite how much I talk, I'm fairly introverted. So, it's been one of those things I have to kind of consciously put out there. But it's also kind of like, well, how do I want to be treated, right? I'm this PM. I've heard horror stories of PMs coming in and literally prescribing exactly how engineering had to do something. Because, well, if I didn't tell them, how would they know how to do it? I was like, well, why did you hire them if you think they're all idiots? I want to be the dumbest person in the room. I want to be surrounded by brilliant people. And if my only superpower is not intellectual and it is just being able to get everybody towards the common goal and I've got the right goal, they're going to get me there, right? So I'm enabling other people to do these things. And from their perspective, I'm providing the work, I'm providing direction. That's fine. But in the end, if this thing works for me, it's like magic, right? I just talk to some people and cool things happen. But they don't want my meetings. They don't want to deal with all the stuff I deal with. So, it's a decent trade off.
It's like what you said in the very beginning. You're a composer.
Yeah, it's the orchestration model. You're not a CEO of the product because you can't hire and fire anybody, and you're not somebody who walks in the room and everybody goes, "Yes, sir, yes, ma'am," no matter what you tell them, no matter how stupid. Ideally, this is a group that will say, "That's a dumb idea." So, you're a conductor. You might know how to play an instrument or two, but you don't know how to play that instrument as well as your first chair. Probably not even as well as your second chair in any of those pieces, right? You're relying on them to be the badasses that they are. Your job is to give them direction and clarity. And all those same people will say, yeah, I'm an awesome player, but a good conductor makes everything better because we're getting everybody towards the same count, everybody in there. And if you're collaborative, all works. And people feel like they're valued because they are. People feel like they matter because they do. Their input comes in and they're protected so that we can try some things. And it really just takes a lot of weight off. And if you've ever worked in a very toxic workplace where everybody gets blamed for stuff, well, that's horrible for product management because nobody wants to try anything because nobody wants to be wrong and nobody trusts anybody else. And it is just being, I may not be the best PM here. I'm definitely not Steve Jobs, but here's what I can offer and what we're going to do. And so far, it's usually working for me.
Mhm. Do you have time for one more question? And I know we're a little bit over. Um, how do you handle very stressful situations at work? Let's say, for example, a launch day gone wrong. From your background as news artist, what are your
So, well, this may be about, I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie from the news side, right? So, when things went wrong, that were usually when things were the most exciting, like being a firefighter. You didn't want to fire, but man, fighting it could be kind of fun. Um, but I had errors. I had stuff that went out on the front page of a newspaper of over 100,000 people that contained a factual error and would get raked over the coals for it. I feel awful. But the next step was, well, how do I not do that again? Why did it go wrong? What did we miss? So for me, a lot of this comes into, and this also comes from your leadership's appetite not to be super blamey, is it's one thing to be responsible. It's another to take the fall. Being responsible means we'll have a candid conversation about what went wrong. Why do we think it went wrong? What could we do from there? And I've got a great boss. I've done some stuff here and there, and he's come back and said, "Well, I wouldn't have done it that way. Here's how I'm, redirect." So we're there. So part of it is you're going to feel like crap. There's no way you're not. And there's days I've laid awake, stressed on how bad things were going to go. I had a case at the newspaper where the publisher's login kept failing on the app over and over and over. So I would hear from, so not the publisher, from the CEO of the entire company. So I would hear from their main IT guy when so and so was having problems, and I'd be like, "Oh my god, okay." So after my stomach ate itself, you have to get up and go. But you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna fall down on your face. You're gonna find if you're not, you're playing it too safe. You're not planning, and you're not paranoid enough. So part of a job as a PM is to what are all the ways things could go wrong. so that we can kind of minimize those risks. But notice we say minimize, we never say remove risk. We can only reduce it. You can do all the right things and everything can still go wrong. So the best way to confront it is first fix it. What's the triage? How are we going to go about it? What do we need to do? So be very active in trying to solve the problem now and understand where it's at and dive in. So you are responsible. That's what I mean. How do we fix it? I'm not sure what's going on. I'll find out. I'll give you a report. But the point is, you accept that responsibility. UX screwed this up. Well, maybe UX screwed it up, but you let it out the door. You take the fall, you deal with it, and then you can talk as a team later on. Your team will respect you for it. Your peers will respect you for it because they see you stepping up and not being afraid to take responsibility for things. And you're really pushing to solve them and make sure this doesn't happen. So, that's the repentance aspect of it. If you don't care or you avoid, nobody will trust you. You're going to actually look better if you've had a couple mistakes under your belt and you've really stepped up to improve them because you become a known quantity and they know, okay, you are putting your money where your mouth is because, if you're going to call out issues or problems in other places, you got to be able to take it. And you build a thick skin. And I'm one of those anxious worriers. So, I get it, but facing it head on generally minimizes it.
Yeah, and those are the biggest lessons are from when we do fail. Sorry, one more question. Um, because you're a distinguished instructor at General Assembly, what are the main frameworks that you think somebody should utilize or understand during their studies to
Right.
move into product management career?
Okay. So as long as you understand that frameworks are simply heuristics to help you figure out how to do things when you're not entirely sure, and that you can bring in new ones or change them anytime you like that makes sense, that they're just aids, you'll be okay. The core piece for using any framework is what I've said before. Know the problem, know the customer, understand how we're getting to our outcomes. The frameworks are basically tools to help you make those incremental decisions along the way. So I mentioned Teresa Torres's opportunity framework. That is a framework for taking a bunch of possible opportunities from a particular problem to solve and understanding how to do that. I like lean, actually. I tend to think more lean because it's really, well, what if we do something? What changes? So Dan Olson is got a great lean framework. Um, I tend to really kind of use that in everything, which is what do we know? So, what have we measured? What did we do? What happened? What did we learn? How do we adjust from there? Because that fits into every framework, no matter what. After that, it really kind of depends on what it is you're building, because I could say lean is great, but if I'm building pharmaceuticals, lean is not so great, right? You want a waterfall with that one. So it really depends on kind of what your constraints are and whether you need to remove your risks up front or incrementally or at the back end, which kind of dictates what they are. But I'd always say start with lean because it's fundamental thinking. It's the basis of all the science stuff, and you can always build off of there and add pieces. Our own internal framework right now, because we deal with compliance, is a mix of leanish and waterfall because I have to do some steps. So it's not what I would call truly agile because we really can't be for those particular things. So read and build your own. Start with the lean. Start with the simple stuff. And then read all the pieces from there. But at the end, what I would say is to make sure any one of those fits is do the things. Going back to what we said about those hackathons or whatever, your best education is going to be doing the thing and seeing where you screwed up and being able to interrogate yourself. Why did that screw up? Why didn't that work? What can we adjust from there? Because that's the best use case of learning. And if you're getting into the business, you can build a portfolio. I've used an example of where I was helping an alumni buddy of mine to build an app and it did not pan out. And I could fully explain what was wrong on the stakeholder side, and I can fully explain where I screwed up and what it led me to learn. And I've used that in job interviews. Learning is what happens when things don't go the way they should. So, build those things up. They'll help build your confidence up. You're doing the things. You can kind of see what the frameworks work with. But other than that, they are exactly that. They're just tools to help you make some decisions. Stick with your product thinking hats.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much, Chuck. I have so many more questions, but there's not enough time. I
All right,
really
let's.
appreciate you coming and on and just sharing all your experiences. There is a link to if anyone does have any questions for Chuck. His information is there. Thank you again, Chuck. Very nice to have you on today.
Thank you. I've been a member of PMHQ for a while. It was very, very much of an honor to be on here. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope to have you on again.
Take care.
You too. Bye. Bye, everyone.